apology impossible. Philip is a hard-working box cab diesel. He also takes trains down the line. Early one morning, Sir Topham Hatt promised Philip that another engine was coming to help. "That's nice," said Philip. "Make sure the engine feels welcome here," added Sir Topham Hatt. Later, Philip was resting at Knapford. "I am happy for another engine to help me," he said. He heard puffing noises. Someone was coming. Philip then found out that the engine who had come was Alfred.
"You are nothing but a small, short shrimp on wheels," snarled Alfred. "Us big LNER engines are always better."
"That's super rude. You should apologize now," said Philip crossly. Alfred puffed away without apologizing. Henry then arrived with his passenger train. "Henry, another green engine was acting nasty to me," said Philip. "Hold on, are you referring to Alfred?" puffed Henry. "Yes," said Philip. Meanwhile, Alfred took half of Philip's train down the line.
"I'll show that shorty how the LNER runs,"
he growled pompously. Soon, Alfred arrived at Wellsworth Yards. Edward had shunted the train. "Take care with the tankers," puffed Edward.
"No, you old puffball,"
snarled Alfred. "That's not new. I've heard that before," snapped Edward. Then Alfred puffed away. One minute he was on the rails. The next, he fell off the bridge and into the water. Only one tanker was unharmed. No one was hurt, but the other tankers and the brake van were smashed. Later, Philip lifted Alfred onto a flatbed with the breakdown train. "Is that how the LNER runs?" giggled Philip. Alfred said nothing. Philip arrived at the works with Sir Topham Hatt, who was cross with Alfred. "Alfred, you have been nothing but a bully to Philip all day," he boomed. "Apologize immediately." Sorry I bullied you all day, moaned Alfred. I forgive you, said Philip. You will be sent away soon, boomed Sir Topham Hatt. The next day, Alfred was sent away in disgrace. Now, Philip, said Sir Topham Hatt, I have bought an engine that will do all the jobs that Alfred failed to do. You will meet the engine at Wellsworth Yards. Philip arrived at Wellsworth. Oh, is that Neil? Philip asked. Yes, it's me, he puffed. I've been on sold off for a long time. So, said Philip, you'll be doing every job Alfred neglected doing? Why, yes, replied Neil. Soon, they became good friends. Philip hardly ever talks about Alfred now, and he knows that sometimes he needs a little help. Rosie's brother. It was a beautiful day on Sodor. Both Rosie and 87546 were resting at Hilltop Yards. Tomorrow, one of my surviving siblings will come here on trial to help out, said Rosie cheerfully. Oh, yes, replied 87546. The next day, both engines saw an engine with the same shape as Rosie. Rosie and 87546 meet Paul. I will give him a trial, Sir Topham Hatt boomed. Then he left. So, Rosie, you little punk, Paul sneered. Us green engines are always better than you and that blue fat face. Hey, you are super pompous, rude, and I know it, puffed 87546. Well, puffed Rosie, you were like that when you first arrived. Then Paul puffed away. I tell you, puffed 87546, I think history is repeating itself. Later, Sir Topham Hatt had various important jobs for Paul. First, I want you to take a passenger train to a station so they can hop on Omri's train. Then, I want you to take a freight train to the yard. And after that, you will take a passenger train to the airport. Yes, sir, puffed Paul. Also, take Rosie and 87546 with you. And Sir Topham Hatt left. This made Paul cross. I know my way better than anyone else here, he puffed crossly. Soon the three engines were waiting. After the conductor's whistle blew, The train pulled out of the station. "Please slow down," puffed Rosie. "Nonsense," grumbled Paul. "I'm not going to sit around doing nothing. Now hurry up, you idiots." "He always has to be the arrogant brother of mine," puffed Rosie. "What a fine day, isn't it?" puffed 87546. "It would be if I did not have to roll behind Mr. Pompous Pistons," puffed Rosie, referring to Paul. When the three engines arrived at the station, Paul was happy, but not Rosie and 87546. Omri was there as well. The passengers left the three engines coaches and boarded Omri's coaches. "As I've been told, I'm taking these passengers to their boat," and he puffed away. Paul was still fuming, much to Rosie's and 87546's annoyance. "I've had enough of all these complaints all day," puffed 87546. At last, Rosie and 87546 had enough. "If you want to take this passenger train, do it yourself," they puffed. And that is exactly what Paul did after the conductor's whistle blew. Paul kept bumping his coaches, but said nothing. When Paul arrived at the airport, the passengers were cross. "What a rotten ride," growled some of them. "Our daughter had her stuffed toy fly from her hands because we were bumped around," said a girl's parents. "This engine is a stuck-up drag racer," said another. Paul was super cross. "I'm taking no more silly passengers," he puffed. His driver accidentally pulled the regulator while the coaches were uncoupled, but Paul didn't realize it. Paul did not see two red flags on the side of the tracks. Ahead, a bridge was under repair. Billy and Oliver took the workmen, and they did not see Paul coming towards the bridge. Paul couldn't stop himself because he went onto the bridge at 80 miles per hour. Then he came off the bridge and fell into the water. "What were you thinking?" puffed Billy crossly. "That was reckless of you to do 80 in a 4-mile-an-hour construction zone," added Oliver. Paul was shamefaced. Later, the bridge was repaired, and Rosie and 87546 arrived with the breakdown train. "Well," chuckled Rosie, "you have been so watery, he. Paul said nothing as he was put back on the rails. At Hilltop Yards, Sir Topham Hatt was cross with Paul. "Your bad behavior has caused nothing but confusion and delay," he boomed. "You complained about being at the back of that freight train, bumped your passengers on the way to the airport, and you also kept being rude to Rosie and 87546. Rosie decided to stick up for her brother. "Sir," puffed Rosie, The day after Alice's birthday, Thomas told me about Daisy, and even though she made bad choices, she was given another chance. I know it's your choice, of course, but I just wanted you to know that. Sir Topham Hatt took Rosie's words with much thought. You're correct, Rosie. He turned to Paul. Even though you misbehaved today, I'm still offering you a second chance. What would you say about that? Well, puffed Paul, even though I've learned a lot on this railway, no, but thank you for offering. And Rosie, Paul added, thank you for sticking up for me. You're a really great sister. That, puffed Rosie, is one of the nicest things you have ever told me. Paul was still sad when he went home in disgrace. Both Rosie and 87546 worked even harder to make sure that Paul doesn't return. Gordon is a tank engine too. Gordon was back in his old self, but was still fuming. How dare they make me look hideous, he puffed. Then Duck arrived. Well, 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 he said. What do you want? Replied Gordon. It was I that caused you to be a tank engine, said Duck. How? Asked Gordon. It was my driver, he said, who wrote that note to Sir Topham Hatt, who in turn mailed it to the works, and they accepted his request. Gordon was furious. I'm out of here, he puffed, and he left the sheds in a huff. Later, Gordon was planning to get back at Duck with Splatter and Dodge. What's our plan? Splatter asked curiously. Well, said Gordon, we can go to a siding. Dodge's driver can place a rail spike there. Then Duck will fall into the water. That will happen, said Dodge. The three engines arrived next to a siding. We're on to phase 1, puffed Gordon. Dodge's driver placed a rail spike on the line. Then the 3 engines ran off backwards. Later, Duck was pulling some milk tankers down the line. Duck wasn't aware of this, but he had been put on the wrong track. He then smashed through some old buffers. Duck and the brake van were left, but the tankers were sunk. "Oh no," said Duck sadly. "I've been damaged from all that." After Duck was placed onto a flatbed with the breakdown train, Edward felt bad for him. "It's all right," replied Duck as he was being brought to the works. Sir Topham Hatt came to the works to see Duck. "Cheer up, Duck. It wasn't your fault," he said. "I know that," puffed Duck sadly. "Well," said Sir Topham Hatt, "another engine will do your work. As for Gordon, Splatter, and Dodge, I will send them to work at Whip's waste dump for a few days." "However," he said, "another engine will come and do your work." And he left. Soon, the engine arrived to take over Duck's trains. But that's another story. Peter's first day. Peter, the new engine, loved all the attention from the engines on the Little Western and became friends with them. He enjoyed the topic about the time Donald rescued Billy from Scrap. Thomas saw Peter come into the station with Alice and Mirabelle. "I've never seen an ATF pulling coaches," he chuffed. "I know," replied Peter. "Nobody has seen me and my siblings pull any coaches." The conductor's whistle blew, and Peter left the station with his passengers. Peter gave a friendly hello to Geoffrey, who was taking passengers. Peter saw Gordon at the station. "Hello," he puffed. No reply came because Gordon was full of self-importance. Gordon's conductor whistle blew, and he puffed away. "You pull us gently, but we do miss Duck," said Alice and Mirabelle. "I understand," replied Peter. "We don't want to keep the passengers waiting." And he puffed away after the conductor's whistle blew. Gordon was coming down the tracks with the express. "I'm going to set a record," puffed Gordon proudly. He was so puffed up in his smoke box, his regulator failed. Mr. Speedy is going super fast, puffed Gillen. This is so much fun, puffed Gordon. The wind blew around him. This is so lovely, he puffed as he crossed a viaduct. Gordon passed by a ditch. Silly things, he puffed, remembering the time he fell into one. That's strange. I'm on another track, puffed Gordon as he continued on. He was enjoying himself enormously coming down the line, but there was trouble further ahead. Omri was struggling with his train. When Gordon came to the crossing, his driver put on the brakes, but it was too late. 2 freight cars flew off the tracks. One landed on Omri's tender. Oops, puffed Gordon. Sorry about that. It's okay, puffed Omri. The freight car on my tender reminds me of back on the mainland. A few hours after the accident, Duck returned from the works. He was given a welcome back by all the other engines on the Little Western. I missed you, as well as everyone else here, puffed Billy. The engines gave Duck a welcome back. The express had been taken by Henry, and both Gordon and Omri laid off the tracks. It took a long time, but at last Gordon was back on the tracks. Sir Topham Hatt came to see Gordon. The accident was in no way your fault. We'll get that regulator fixed at once, he said. That made Gordon feel better. A few days after Gordon was repaired, Omri came back from the works, looking good as new. Now Peter happily lives and works on Sodor. He occasionally pulls passengers down the line. Peter has also made new friends, including both Rosie and 87546.